So thank you, Rebecca, for such an inspiring talk. After hearing what you're saying and reading your book, which I enjoyed a lot and I strongly recommend it to everyone, I feel empowered. And one of the things is that there's the possibility of doing good and at the same time making your business be in a competitive advantage regarding the rest of the companies. So you talk in your book about many examples. You've also shared some of them now, and of people that believed that change was possible. What would you say, what common feature do you think these leaders, these change makers had?
So I think it's useful to think of the moment we're in as one of disruption or discontinuity. The world is fundamentally changing. We have huge shifts underway: climate change, globalization, robotics and AI, all these new technologies coming online. So it's a moment of change. So the leaders that I see who are taking advantage of these opportunities to build new business models, they are visionary. Sounds very remote. Let me say they think more widely. Instead of focusing only on today and this week, they look more broadly at what might happen, at what could happen. And they also think more broadly of their role as a business person. Yes, every successful leader I know in this area is an excellent business person. You have to really focus on the bottom line if you're going to make these business models work. But at the same time, they are deeply aware of what's happening in the world. They are very committed to making a difference using the resources of their company. And they're able to hold that tension. So I had the great pleasure of working with Mr. Paul Polman, who just resigned as CEO of Unilever, in the first few years when he became CEO at Unilever. And I was facilitating his strategic retreats. So this was the meeting between him and his senior team. And he was almost schizophrenic. What do I mean when I say that? On the one hand, he would open the meetings by talking about what was happening in the world and how so many children were dying prematurely and the way in which Unilever soap could really improve hygiene and make a difference. And he would give this incredibly inspiring speech. And then he would turn to the head of the deodorants business and say, and in Indonesia, how are sales of deodorant this quarter? And he was able to move between these two perspectives. Very, very experienced business person and visionary leader. And of course, very empathic for his team. I mean, he transformed the entire organization at Unilever to be more purpose-driven.
I like the term visionary because you read throughout the book several examples. One of them was back in 2004, there was a CEO from an energy company and you have a matrix there and he had to decide the future according to two uncertainties. One of them was the price of renewable energies, if it would be high or low in the coming years. And the other uncertainty was regulations. So he had to decide the strategy of the company and the investment to be made according to these two uncertainties. So he kind of looked at his crystal ball and said, yes, I'm sure technology will lower the prices of the renewable energies, and also I guess that governments will control the emissions of the companies. So for me, and I would like to ask you this question, but is it easier to predict the future nowadays? And how come not everyone is moving in that direction?
It's never easy to predict the future. And in that particular example, the CEO, it's disguised in the book, so let me call him Fred. Fred wasn't sure what would happen, but he knew there was a good chance the world would change. And so the investments he made in renewable energy were a hedge, a strategic hedge against what might happen. And that's why I use that 2x2 tool. It's a very simple scenario analysis tool to help senior teams and students step back and say, we don't know what the future is going to be. But picking one future and putting all your resources against that one future, that's almost certainly a mistake. So it's very important to plan for multiple futures. Now, why is it so hard still for so many business people to really understand how profoundly the world is changing? I was the Eastman Kodak Professor of Management at MIT for more than 20 years. And that was a coincidence, but a deeply ironic one, since all my early research, those first 20 years of research, were all about why is it so hard for large organizations to change? Why is it that entrepreneurial firms so often see where the future is going, but the large firms, they're like, nothing is happening, I won't make any money, I'm too busy. I mean, partly because it's hard. It's hard when you're running an organization to see that things need to change. You have a team that are focused on operating excellence, that have been promoted and cut their teeth on the skills required to run the existing business. And now suddenly you're saying, you know, in the waste business, it's not about throwing everything into a hole in the ground. It's about bringing in a high-tech machine where you put a car in at one end and all the parts of the car come out at the other end as aluminium and steel and cobalt and nickel and everything that went into the car. So it's a huge shift in how you think about the industry. I think that's just hard. I actually think the good news is we're making a lot of progress. One of the things I'm really excited about are in the capital markets, the very largest asset owners are beginning to say climate change is an existential risk to the stability of the entire financial market and the whole economy, and are beginning to say, I have a fiduciary duty to address these issues. So Hiro Mizuno, for example, who was the chief investment officer at the GPIF, the Japanese government pension fund, that's the largest pension fund in the world. It's $1.7 trillion in assets. He came to believe he had a fiduciary duty to address climate change because it was the single largest threat to long-term returns in his portfolio. And he was responsible for the Japanese people's pensions for the next 30 to 100 years. So I think there's a lot of hope on the horizon because these investors are starting to push the firms in their portfolio to say, no, we really have to address some of these issues.
Yes, actually, you're talking about that they have the investor companies have a responsibility. So do each of us individuals, because we have a future to leave to our children and so on. No? So you also mentioned, you talked about startups and entrepreneurs. I know that startups are already leading in sustainability in many sectors, in fashion, new models in energy and banking. Actually, at I University, that's where I come from, we are strong believers in entrepreneurship. We know that, like, I think it's 95% of our students, they want to change in their career. Obviously, not all of them go and start their companies, but 30% of them, yes, they do. And what do you think is the role of startups? Because the transition is easier for them than the big companies. What's the role of startups in reimaging capitalism?
So many roles. One of the most important is pushing the large firms to change. Sometimes when I work with very large companies and the CEO says, look, I want to change my organization, what can I do? I say there were two things that will really help you change. The first is almost going bankrupt, but I really don't recommend that. So it's really not a good way to discover you have to change. The second is watching the entrepreneurial firms, because the entrepreneurial firms have so many great advantages. One is they're not encumbered by the old way of thinking about things. They can see that we have to move away from eating so much meat, particularly beef, and that we're going to have to find a new way to eat something that looks like meat that generates less carbon emissions. And so you've got literally hundreds of firms trying to grow meat in vats. Or another entrepreneurial firm I know about knows that there's mining is creating enormous environmental damage, and we're running out of a lot of key minerals. And so they're looking to mine minerals from the bottom of the deep sea, from modules, great huge rocks at the bottom of the deep sea. Now, I say this to you and you're probably like, really? Seriously? But this is the genius of entrepreneurs, is they're looking in really unusual directions. The second great advantage of entrepreneurial firms is they have no money. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a great advantage, and we spend a lot of time working with entrepreneurial firms, helping them access resources. But having to be really focused on the bottom line, having to count every dollar, means you really listen to the marketplace. You really listen to what your customers and your employees want. And one of the things both customers and employees want right now is products that they believe will help build a just and sustainable world. So customers, as yet, won't pay more for sustainably produced products or services, but they will switch. If you offer them the same product, same values, same price, and you tell them, and this here, we're treating our workforce well and we're not creating environmental damage, they will switch. Unilever claims, and I believe them, that their purpose-driven brand are growing 40% faster than their more conventional brands, that 73% of Unilever's growth now is from their purpose-driven brands. And the other thing that entrepreneurial firms are picking up is you get the best talent. The employees really want to work. People, young people particularly, but I don't think it's just young. Many people want to work for a company which they feel can make a difference. And that is really driving change. And so entrepreneurs have great people, they're listening to the marketplace, and they are pushing the larger firms to change. And of course, some of them will come up with incredible new ideas that will transform entire industries. Eric Osmundsen in Norway is an example. He's completely changing the technology for recycling, which makes it much more likely other people will do recycling. What entrepreneurial firms do is take that great idea and move it down the learning curve so that others can adopt it. That's what transformed wind and solar. Well, that and significant government subsidies in Germany and China. But you needed those passionate, technologically focused entrepreneurs who really wanted to change the world as well.
Yes. If you had one advice to give an entrepreneurship professor, what would it be? In an MBA course, I mean. One advice.
Just one?
Well,
I can't have two?
Two or three if you want.
Okay. So, first piece of advice. There really is money to be made in addressing the major social and environmental problems we face. There's a huge amount of research now suggesting that treating your employees better will increase productivity and creativity. We have literally hundreds of examples of entrepreneurial firms uncovering new business models that both make money for the firm and transform industries. So that is the first piece of advice, is look for those cases, look for those examples. The second piece of advice, because I do want to, is this idea that business has a responsibility beyond simply making money. That in the end, if all business does is focus on profits. And if business takes shortcuts, if it seems, it's just easier not to pay attention to labor conditions in my supply chain, it's just easier to keep using fossil fuels, even though solar and wind might cost 3 or 4% more, but, that's not up to me. That if we keep doing that, we risk losing the institutions, the world that has made us so prosperous and so free. So that business has a broader responsibility. Not that that means that firms should lose money, not that that means you don't have a responsibility to your investor, but it does mean that as a business person, you should pay attention to politics. I say business should be aware of civics, not politics, that saying and being willing to say in public that a strong democracy is important, that strong civil society and a free media is important to the success of business. That is really important. It's a big thought. It's a big thought to land at the end of a talk like this. But I really believe it's true that if we have the technology and the resources to solve the problems that we face, but it will require real partnership between business and government and a private sector that is committed to helping government be democratic, transparent, accountable, and capable. And it's that partnership that we need in the end.
Yeah, Marta was introducing you at the beginning as a Harvard professor, but you're actually one in 25 Harvard professors. And you've been teaching for many years a very popular course at HBS, that's Reimagining Capitalism. And actually, it has great success, and you have even a waiting list, 300 students and waiting list. What barriers did you have to overcome during these years? Has the mentality changed? Are students now demanding this type of courses? Should it be everywhere in every program? What do you think?
I think it should be everywhere in every program. And you're very kind to talk about the work that I've done at Harvard. But there are many business school faculty at hundreds of business schools who are moving in this direction. In the United States, I think about the amazing work being done at Yale and Michigan and a number of other really brilliant business schools. And in my own country, I'm British, I think of all the work that's being done at Oxford and Cambridge in this area. So Harvard is not at the leading edge. Don't tell anyone from Harvard, I told you that. But there are many, many fantastic business academics moving in this direction. My experience of our students has been that, yes, they are demanding it. Not all of them, but I would say 80% of our students are deeply worried about these issues. In February, before COVID hit, we asked the first-year class at the Harvard Business School, nearly 1,000 people, do you think capitalism is broken? And 50% of them said yes. This is at the Harvard Business School. They are very concerned with what's happening. And in fact, I sometimes think that business schools are behind practice. Many of the firms I work with are moving very aggressively in this direction. Thinking about, for example, reporting on environmental, social, and governance metrics is becoming standard across most of the world's largest firms. But there's still some accounting courses where this is not yet mentioned. So I think it's really important that we improve and move forward as fast as we can within business schools on this front.
Yes, and I do think that the university and the business schools should also be like those visionaries. We need to know what's going to happen so that our students receive the best content so that they can thrive in their lives and in their works.
Oh, Isabel, I just think you're so right. I mean, the world is going to change so dramatically. If we teach them to be business leaders as they should have been 10 years ago, we are failing in our responsibility. I think you are exactly right. We have to prepare them for the future.
Yes, and also I was thinking, and you've talked already about this, the metrics. Are we lacking the adequate metrics? There are certain parameters that can kind of guide us if we're doing right or wrong, but metrics on sustainability performance that can also guide then the government with their policies. What's your opinion on this?
Yes, our current metrics are not at all what we need. If you think at the government level, we've really focused on gross domestic product, GDP. But that's like focusing only on the revenue of a company. We've not looked at the assets of a nation. So, for example, suppose I'm in a country with plentiful forests. I can increase my GDP by cutting all the forests down. Well, that's great for this year, but not much good for later. Or I can reduce government deficits and cut taxes by getting rid of the educational and healthcare systems. I mean, that would be really helpful, right? No, it would not be good. So we need better measures of what the economists call natural and social capital. Natural capital, how resilient is the atmosphere? What is the cost of increasing the temperature? What is the cost of poisoning the ocean? We're effectively poisoning the world's oceans and fishing them out. So they're no longer going to be able to provide as much protein. Humans have been taking billions of dollars of protein out of the oceans. We're not going to be able to keep doing that if we keep going as we are. So we need measures of natural capital, but also social capital. What is social well-being? What is our average level of education? What are our levels of mental health? How engaged are we politically? Do we have a strong civic conversation about the democracy? All these measures, these kinds of measures are critical at the national level. At the firm level, we're trying to run firms with only financial metrics. We're not thinking about the social and environmental impact they're having. My colleague George Seraphim at the Harvard Business School has helped to found an initiative called the Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative. And they just released their first report. It's public source, so anyone can look at the numbers that they generated. They have a sample of 1,800 firms, and they find that for a third of those firms, the environmental damage those firms are causing is more than the total profits of the firms. That's amazing. And what kind of reaction is that going to bring from employees and customers and investors? So we need to start measuring the environmental and social impact that we're having. And that's the good news is that's underway. The bad news is that there are, you count it, 7, 8, 10, 20 different standards for measuring these things, but that's okay. This is what innovation looks like. This is why we need good researchers in this space, thinking about what are the metrics that are material, auditable, replicable, that investors can use to make decisions, that customers can use, and the firm can use. Because if you discover you're causing more environmental damage than your profits, I'm hoping you're thinking, whoa, what can we do? So yes, we need new metrics. One of the things I say is I used to think accountants were boring, but now I know they are the foundation of modern civilization and absolutely essential to saving the world.
The accountants and I would also say the programmers, that they decide everything. No, no. I was very sorry to hear that we're running out of time, but and I would stay here forever. I'm having a great time, but I would like to close asking one question to empower everyone to start doing something. So I'm not a CEO. I don't work for the government. So can't I make a difference?
Absolutely, you can make a difference. I like to think that we need an avalanche of change. political, social, cultural, business change if we're to address huge problems like climate change. But avalanches are started by pebbles, and each of us is a pebble, and no one knows which pebble is going to drive change. If you are a business school professor, for example, you have an enormous opportunity to make a difference by learning more about these issues, or if you already know about them, teaching your students, whether it's in finance or marketing or strategy. If you're a consumer, and we're all consumers, you can pay attention to who you buy from. If you're an employee and you work for a company or run your own company, you can begin to look for shared value. I promise you it's out there. We have hundreds of cases at the business school showing that there's enormous opportunity to make a difference and still make money. And many of these opportunities come not from the CEO, but from people inside the organization who see that, wait, if we did this, it would make a big difference. I tell one story about a man called Michel Legens, who was brand manager at Lipton tea bags, a commodity product in a declining market. And he and his friends arguably changed the entire business, and with it, the tea industry worldwide. And last but not least, you're a neighbor and a citizen. We need to tell everyone that change needs to come, demonstrate what it looks like in our own lives, and ensure that our politicians put the right kinds of policies in place to make a difference. That's who politicians listen to. People like us, individuals working together with each other to drive change. The world's in trouble, but I absolutely believe we can save it.
I believe that too. And it's been a pleasure and an honor for me to be here today. Thank you very much, Rebecca. I hope we can meet at any other time. Thank you.
Oh, Isabella, I hope so too. It would be really fun to meet in person. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks.
Take care.
Take care, you too.